Hi and welcome to Our Small Table. Today we're making make-ahead pie dough and then using it to make a fast fruit pie using frozen fruit. Here's our finished dish. Let's see how we got here. This is quite a straightforward recipe, and actually the most important part is the temperatures. We've got our flour in here. Our butter needs to be cold, so don't let it sit out for very long, especially in the summertime. And the same with our shortening. It needs to be either cold or frozen. Because I know that I make this fairly often, I just keep a tablespoon of shortening in the fridge all the time, so I always have a little bit cold ready. Our salt. And since I know I'm going to use this for a sweet pie, I'm going to go ahead and add some sugar just to make the dough of the crust a little bit sweeter. And we're just going to cut the butter and shortening into the flour. We're looking for the shape of peas, about the size of peas. Now, as far as the sugar goes, if you're just going to make up some of the dough and put it in the freezer and you don't know what you're going to use it for, just leave the sugar out entirely. It will still be a good dough even for sweet pies and tarts, and you can use it for savory tarts much more easily than if you add a bunch of sugar to it. If you have a pastry cutter, you might find that that goes a little bit faster. And this is all I'm going to do, and so I'm going to leap forward in time when we get to where we're going. We're just about there. Now remember, we're not trying to make the butter disappear entirely. I'm not blending it, just cutting it in. And that's also why I like to do it by hand. It only took me a couple of minutes, not even long enough for the camera to turn itself off. And if I did this in a small food processor, which you can do, I'd run too much of a risk of blending the butter in. See if I can get this to a better angle so you can see the texture. And now we're just going to add part of the water. We always measure the whole amount, but we don't add it all at once, because depending on the weather, how humid it is, where exactly you live, you may or may not need all of it. We're just hoping to form moist clumps. And I'm going to need more of the water than I often do, because I need the dough to stick together when the time comes. And as you can see, it's starting to come together. So I don't want to work it too much more, and I don't want to add too much more water, but we'll do a little bit more because it's still a little bit drier than I want it to be. And that should be just about right. Now I'm going to kind of eyeball dividing this into two. Each recipe of this dough makes two crusts. So you can either do a single pie with a mini pie with a top and bottom crust, or you can do 2 mini tarts, whatever your preference is. I'm just going to wrap it in cling film. I like to flatten it just a little bit, partly because it makes it easier to roll later, but also because it lets the cool of the fridge or freezer get all the way through better. And if I get this at the right angle, you can see little bits of butter still visible in here. Like I said before, that's totally fine. It will help with the way that it bakes to have the butter in like that. And this has to go into the fridge for 30 minutes before it can be rolled out and used, or it can go straight into the freezer and you can be done with it for today. It can stay in the freezer for up to about 5 months. I am going to go ahead and use these though so we can see what to do with them next, and I shall return. So your dough's been in the freezer and you need to make a pie, but you don't have time. You can use that dough to make a regular pie or a tart with fresh fruit, but you can also use frozen fruit and you don't even have to thaw it. So we have frozen peaches and raspberries here, and some sugar. We're using unsweetened frozen fruit. If you're using sweetened frozen fruit, then you don't want to add as much sugar. And tapioca starch, also called tapioca flour. And we're just going to get the fruit pieces pretty well coated by the sugar and the tapioca starch. You can use whatever fruit combination you'd like. If you have blueberries, you can use those in place of the raspberries. You're trying to go for a general ratio for your fruit, sugar, and tapioca starch of 4 parts fruit, 1 part sugar, 1/3 part tapioca starch. So I'm going to go ahead and set this aside and let the fruit soak up some more of that dry ingredients, and I'll clear this away and we'll roll out the dough. We have a lightly floured surface here, and the oven is preheating to 400 degrees Fahrenheit, and I've taken my rings off since I'm going to be working with dough. And I'm not going to do a full top for this pie. I'm just going to cut out some pieces. And I have not floured it quite well enough, clearly. Even though I thought I had a little bit too much flour here, but sometimes that happens. So just as an example, once you've got it to the thinness you'd like, you just use a cutter to cut out a few pieces, lift those out of the way, set them aside, and I'll clear this up and we'll roll out the bottom piece. There we go. And as I said in a previous video, you can use your knuckle to press it in to the corners. If you've got long nails, you don't want to press with your fingertips because your fingernail will go right through, and I accidentally did that over here myself, so it's something that happens to everybody. And you just want to go ahead and get your fruit in. If you'd like, you can take the time to lay your peaches out nice and neat. Try to get the raspberry into all parts of it. I'm not going to completely fan out my peaches, but we'll get them flattened down a little bit. And the last little bit of the sugar and juices. And I need to clean up my hands before I touch the top dough, so I'll be right back. We're just laying those pieces that we cut out on top, and then go ahead and cut away the excess pie dough around the edge. You can flute it, you can make it look pretty. This is not going to be a presentation pie. It's too low in the fruit amount for it to be a presentation pie. So I'm not really that worried about it. This is really just for when you want to have a pie and you don't want to take a lot of time about it. And you can cover this with a little bit of an egg wash on the top of the dough if you'd like, whatever you'd like. And this is going to go into the oven and we'll see it when it comes out. And there you have it. Nice, quick and dirty peach and raspberry pie. Thanks for joining me at Our Small Table. The recipe I've used today is linked in the video description and is available at OurSmallTable.com. We're continuing our Make Ahead series, so click subscribe so you don't miss the next video.